The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, welcome everybody. I can see there are a few people already lined up joining us, so welcome. We'll give it a minute or two till clock strikes 12, but thank you for joining us on what's a lovely spring day here in sunny Newcastle on Tyne. So we'll get started. We'll give it till a healthy 12, and then we'll get started because there's a lot to fit in, which I hope you find useful. Good. Well, it is 12 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Thank you very much, everybody, for sparing time to join us today. I'm Guy Letts. I'm founder of CustomerSure, which is a software company, and our product is one of the leading feedback and net promoter platforms, and we've got hundreds of installations around the world. And I'm delighted to welcome Jerry Angrave, who's an expert in customer experience strategy and customer experience programs. We'll get started very soon because I know everybody has busy jobs, but let me quickly explain the running order. Jerry's going to kick off in a second, and he's going to distill umpteen years of experience into about 15 minutes with the most important things that you need to know about customer journey mapping. Then I'm going to do the same on customer feedback. We will try and respect the timing, so we're not going to take questions as we go, but if you do have a question, please do submit it in the chat. You can send it to the organizer and panelists. And my colleague, Darren Wake, is waiting in the wings. He'll collate them. If we've got time at the end, we'll cover them. If not, then we'll email answers afterwards to anybody who's asked. And but we'll release people on time at the end. So let's make a start. I'll hand over to Jerry to start on customer journeys.
Thank you, Guy. If we can just call up the screens. Guy, can you?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
See that? Good, excellent. Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us on this session that I'm going to talk about around customer journey mapping. Those of you who know me, and I think there are a few familiar faces in the audience, it is one of my favorite subjects. So I'm going to share a few thoughts on how we make customer journey mapping effective, strategic, and above all, influential. Now, these are only my thoughts. You may have your own way of running your customer journey mapping sessions, but it'll hopefully give you some either reassurance that you're heading in the right direction. It'll hopefully give you some food for thought about how you strengthen your program of customer journey mapping, because it is a phenomenally powerful tool. Not just in the insights that it gives you, but the conversations it leads to, the collaboration between colleagues, and the understanding of your own business and their own business. So, but if we are to grow the business and make the business stronger and differentiate it based on how we do things, not just what we do, then we need to understand our customers. We need to empathize with what it's like to be on the receiving end of what we do. So journey mapping is a fantastic tool to do that. So I'm going to talk through some thoughts on the kind of the before, during, and after of journey mapping, basically the planning, the facilitation, and then how do we get the value from it afterwards. So so let's roll, if I can make the slides work. There we go. So before we get anywhere near putting rolls of paper on the wall and sticky notes or using an online collaboration tool, my thought is be really clear about what you're going to do with it afterwards. Where is this heading? Why are you doing this work? How are you going to use the insights? The risk that I've seen a lot of times happen is that we do some fantastic journey mapping work, but then because oh, we're not quite sure what to do with it, or who needs to know about this. There's no governance, there's no direction. The journey mapping becomes dust gatherers. So yeah, be really clear about why you're doing it and what's going to happen after you've done the workshops. It'll just save a lot of time, because once you get the journey mapping going, you'll be creating expectations, you'll be creating real momentum, and you need to build on that and take advantage of it. Be really clear about who is doing what. Not necessarily marketing segments, because just because people live in the same postcode or consume the same media doesn't mean they have the same motivations, fears, hopes, expectations. So be really clear about who your customer is and the journey they're on. And again, going too broad can really dilute the perspective. So if you do the end-to-end journey, you may find that while that's fine, you then have to unpack parts of it and drill into bits of the journey. But for the purposes of your journey mapping workshop, be really clear about the scope. Otherwise, you'll get into conversations about, oh, does it include this? Does it include that? And you'll lose 10 minutes, 15 minutes before you've even started. Make it align. What I mean by that is choose your journeys that are important to the business. You may have a favorite journey, that's fine. But actually, the more you can make it align to the corporate objectives, the business objectives, the vision, the brand pillars, the brand proposition, the more traction you're going to get, the more engagement, the more influential your journey mapping becomes. You may have burning platforms you want to address, but yeah, make it look around your business, look to see where you're carrying cost or there's revenue opportunities, and use your journey mapping in those areas. Compelling invites, yeah, reach out right across the business. Get people involved who are not necessarily customer facing. They all have a direct or an indirect role to play, so really important to engage them too. Give them a reason to attend. Give them a reason to go to their boss and say, can you free me up for a few hours to attend this session? Because the more cross-functional you can make it, the better it'll be. And lastly here, should we bring customers in the room? It's up to you, but my advice would normally be no. You have some really, really powerful conversations between colleagues, but they learn about their business, they learn what each other does. They're the sort of conversations that you don't want to have in front of customers. So as we'll see later, yeah, do the journey mapping with colleagues and get it validated later. That would be my advice on that. The facilitation, well, let's get right to the core of it and have a look at a framework, how we might do it online, and then some other points here. So this is a classic customer journey mapping framework, and the way it's built is kind of a template for anyone to use. And this is just set up in PowerPoint. There are online tools you can use that make it look a bit better, that can link through to all the collateral. That's fine. But again, if you are heading into your journey mapping, something like this, it's just got to work, hasn't it? It's just got to be functional. The stages across the top, what are the phases of that journey? What are the stages a customer goes through? But be really clear that that's in your customer's language, not your internal speak, not your process language, not your ops, no acronyms. This is what your customers would say at those different stages. And then for each of those stages, you can look at, well, what are they doing? What's their objective? What's the job to be done? What are they doing, not just with you, but in their own lives as well? Because this is all about how we fit into their lives, not how we expect them to comply with our processes. So what are they doing that may or may not be connected with you, but is relevant to their journey? Remember, this is their journey, not your processes. What are they thinking? Again, just capture all those ideas about what unanswered questions have they got. What are their pain points? What are their frustrations? What are their niggles and gripes? What do they need to know? What don't they know? What's going on inside their head based on, if you've looked at the persona, you'll know that they've got their own fears, expectations, hopes, as well as their needs. And then capture, what are they feeling? Or what are they feeling right throughout the whole process? And often, even in experiences that were outwardly would seem to be quite unemotional, if that's the right word. It's amazing. Even in B2B world, or in areas where customers are, it's very transactional. There'll be a lot of emotion in there, from the angst, the uncertainty, the lack of confidence, the lack of knowledge, through to the excitement and the overwhelming sense of joy, depending on what you do as a business. But if you understand what those emotions are, and we know, don't we, as customer experience people, we know how important that emotional response is. If we're generating these emotions at the moment, how do we now generate the right emotions? So if you have one question to ask of your teams or your leadership team, it's how do you want your customers to feel? Be really clear about that, and then everything, you can build the intentional experiences that will deliver that. So then moving on to that, when you're doing the journey mapping session, you can capture all the ideas. People have loads of ideas about how we can improve, and they'll also raise, understandably, some of the challenges, some of the hurdles. Not to say we can't do that, but what would get in the way. So it's a really good way of, the journey mapping framework is about organizing the thinking, if you like. You'll end up with lots of ideas. I always say then, how do you make sense of all that? Well, one of the ways you can do that is to just get people to vote, give them a way of voting, so you have an immediate proxy for, actually, well, of all these 150 ideas, these 6 are rated by this team of employees as something we should address really quickly, because you need some way of flushing the most important things to the top, and this is just one of the ways of doing it. So in the moment, really, really key. Can we do this online? Yes, we can. It's it's not, I have to say, we probably would all prefer to do it in a meeting room or on site, doing walkthroughs of our premises, getting out and spending time with our customers, looking over their shoulder as they go about their lives and interacting with us. Until we're able to do that, and hopefully that's not that far away, yes, we can do it online. I personally use a combination of Zoom and then Mural, the collaboration tool, but there are lots of other tools around there. Do what's comfortable for you. But I think while the ground rules are, or the rules of engagement are still the same, the fundamental differences are have fewer people, allow or give yourselves less time. So rather than kind of a full day workshop, just do a couple of hours at a time, or 3 hours at the most, spread it out a little bit more. But also take control. I learned the hard way that if you have 20 people on the call, all trying to collaborate and throw ideas in, you lose control. So either have somebody by your side acting as the scribe, or do it yourself, depending on what resources you've got. But yeah, fewer people, a little bit less time, break it down into smaller chunks, and you can still get the outputs that you need. Just some thoughts on the facilitation then, and how do we keep it relevant and on track? Straightforward, yeah, you have to keep people engaged. Some people won't want to be there, some have been told to be there and they've not a clue why. You'll have some people who are drifting off and they've probably got an iPad tucked to the side of their screen watching Netflix or whatever it might be. Get everyone involved and engaged and seek their ideas. Everyone's got some thoughts. But beyond that, it's really key. I always say, get as senior a person as you can to introduce your session, even if it's just online. Yeah, because people have to believe this is important to the leadership team, and the more they can see that in evidence, the better. So yes, by all means introduce it yourself, but if you can, get along one of the directors, CEO, whoever it might be, just to kind of set the scene, set the context, explain how important it is. That in itself is phenomenally powerful. Pre-prepare the stages. You can lose a lot of time by getting to that starting point of defining those stages. So what I tend to do is talk to people who are attending in the days and weeks beforehand, and just agree, let's have a proverbial straw man. Let's have a concept of what these stages might look like, and then just get people to say, does that look right or not? It saves a whole heap of time in finding your starting point. Sharing stories, yeah, get people into the right mindset by asking them to share really good or really bad experiences that they've had themselves, and explore not just what happened, but what their response was, how it affects their behavior in the future, and why that really bad or really good experience happened. What's going on inside that business that meant that person had a really awful time or a really good time? And ask yourself, well, could that happen with us? So again, really intense conversations, full of value. And yeah, and we talked about it. Yeah, get familiar with the persona, engage everybody where you can, and if it's possible, yeah, get out on site and just sit and observe in their office or at their home as they're going about their business. Obviously, it has to be done within safety protocols, but the more we can immerse ourselves in their life, the better the understanding we'll have. Okay, so we've done our journey mapping. What do we do now? Immediately write it up. Doesn't have to be pretty. It can just be done in an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint. Yes, there are other tools that will make it look better, and that can come in time. But in the immediate time after the session, write it up. But as you're doing that, have a think about all the comments, how they tie together. Highlight the themes, whether that's overall themes or by persona or by channel or by product. Yeah, surface those key issues and themes, and then overlay what else you know. So what are your process maps telling you? What is your data and MI telling you? What are all the conversations that you've been listening to in those journey mapping sessions? What are they telling you? And then you can go out and validate it with customers and employees. Don't forget, we can validate this with employees as well, because without that validation, it remains an internal perspective. And if it's only an internal perspective, it's open to challenge when you do go and try and make the case for change. When you validate it, then you can prioritize the actions, the quick wins, the tactical stuff, and then what might it mean strategically, but also culturally. Yeah, in the longer term, how are we going to use these insights to change the way we reward and recognize our frontline teams or anybody in the back office? You know, so tactically, strategically, and culturally, what are we going to do? But crucially, again, putting it in the context of what are we trying to achieve as a business? What's our purpose? What's our vision? How do we want customers to feel? You know, prioritize the actions based on what's going to deliver the most value for the business. So again, make it all align. And if that happens, then you will make it relevant to all your stakeholders, some of whom will be skeptical, some of whom, when you go to and start talking about emotions, will just roll their eyes and go, oh, here's Jerry again trying to sprinkle some magic fairy dust on you know, hugging customers. Yeah, if we demonstrate ways to cut costs, cut out wasted effort that no one values anymore, as well as if we improve these experiences, we'll increase advocacy rates, we'll generate new business, we'll increase cross-sell, upsell, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a real commercial side to this. And then finally, well, where do we go? Well, we can look at what other journeys we might pick up. So again, build a program over time, be patient, build that program of, well, what other journeys have we got? What other personas have we got? What are we going to do for employees? Can we map an employee journey of the recruitment process, or what it's like to deliver some of the experiences? Your people are out on the front line delivering the experiences. You know, what's it like for them? People with a disability, the sunflower lanyard you see there, and that makes a huge difference. If you map the journey, you understand why that stuff is important. Then cast an eye to the future. What's the future state going to be? You can use design thinking methodology. You can use ethnographic studies where, again, you just observe. But again, this is all about building on what you've done. That cohort of CX champions, people you've invited to the sessions, hang on to them, cling on to them, because they are your eyes and ears of the customer. They're the ones that can help spread the word around the business, and really lean on them and get them to do that, because they will help share the stories, not just amongst themselves, amongst their teams, but that point around discussing what does good look like, what does bad look like, could it happen here? Get the leadership team to talk about that as well, because it will then strengthen the clarity of your vision. If you're talking about, we want to be the best at what we do, well, now we've got some real insight that shows us, well, that means we need to do this, we're always going to do this, and we'll never do that. Yeah, so it adds that extra clarity. It also means we can measure what we should be doing, measuring what's of value to the customer, not just what's easy or flattering for us to measure. Build that program, and then once you've done that, yeah, repeat, because it will be just an ongoing cycle. But as I say, it's an incredibly powerful way of sharing the insight, of understanding what it's like for customers, and driving real change. So apologies for rattling through that really quickly, but do I'll share these slides. Do let us know if you have any questions. Yeah, do get in touch if you've got any questions on that. But I hope that was useful, if not a very quick summary of how to make your journey mapping effective, strategic, and influential. So thank you for listening. I'm going to hand back to Guy.
Thanks very much, Jerry. It is a really useful technique. I like that comment you made about getting everybody involved, because it can be quite cathartic at times, but it's great at breaking down the silos as well. You made the point about getting people involved, even if they only have an indirect contact with customers, getting everybody's perspective. If you're punching to be the best at something, it's important to have all those perspectives, but as you say, we're hoping to get everybody on board. So thank you. I've learned a lot to sharpen up my understanding of what happens there. Okay, let me pick up the baton and take it forward, because once you've done journey mapping, the next most useful thing is to take those steps in the customer journey and measure satisfaction at each point, so that no matter where you think you're doing a great job, or where you're trying to do a great job, what's more important is whether your customers think you're succeeding. So we're going to heading for 3 golden rules, but I'm going to set the scene and explain why they're needed. So the traditional approach to customer feedback is to do a big survey, perhaps an annual survey or an all customer survey. The company, it's done its CRM project, and it thinks, right, now we need to focus on customer experience, so we'll do a big survey, because that's what everybody else does. And what I want to give you is just a few things to unlearn, and then I'll replace them with 3 top tips for customer feedback and measuring customer satisfaction, customer experience, and net promoter score, if that's of interest to you. So the old way is that you would do these big surveys with a huge splurge of data, and it would go to people who are running the surveys, and they would do some processing, and then sometime later, possibly some process improvements would roll out in the business. Now, there's quite a few problems with that approach. The surveys that get sent out, and we still all receive these, I still get them week after week in my inbox, they're pretty inconsiderate. They're too long for the most part. You know, I will get a survey that says, please fill in our survey, it'll only take you 10 minutes. Well, it only took me 8 minutes to buy the insurance policy, so why are you asking me for 10 minutes back? It's inconsiderate. The timing is often bad, so it's usually when the company has decided they want some feedback, rather than when the customer is poised with some feedback to give. Response rates, as a result of all the things I've just described, response rates tend to be bad. And then there's a cry, well, we're doing this big project and we've hardly got any data, so they needed some knee-jerk responses. Let's send out reminders. Well, that'll get us some more data. Well, it will, but you're pestering your customers. So it's not a really, in pursuit of what you're trying to improve customer satisfaction, you're actually doing a bad thing. The data comes in all at once, so it's impossible to follow up effectively. And if you've ever done one of those huge customer surveys, you'll know that they are littered, they're peppered with cries for help. And actually, most companies aren't interested in those. They say, well, no, we want to know what processes we need to improve, or where the hotspots are, what training do we need to introduce. But actually, you've got a lot of customers out there hurting with individual issues, which just ignore because they're going to people who are only interested in doing spreadsheets and PowerPoint. So the data is going to the wrong people, or perhaps it doesn't reach the right people, and certainly not in time for them to be able to fix any burning issues. So follow up on those big surveys as an afterthought, and actually, in many cases, it just doesn't happen. So the customer's experience, you've got your data potentially, but customers got nothing in return. So the overall customer experience is poor. And I stand guilty. I'm complicit in this. I was responsible for service in a FTSE 100 company. We were doing this. We were involved knee deep in a net promoter program. But the revenue in my area, which I'd just taken over from somebody else, it was going down in the midst of this championing net promoter program. Revenue that I was responsible for was going down. So I can testify that this method doesn't actually work. When it becomes a quest for data, that's warning bell should ring. That's not customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction is when you've got it's about smiles. It's about people having had a great experience, so great that they want to rave about it to their friends and colleagues and put their personal reputation on the line, if you like, by giving you a word of mouth referral. That's when it changes from something which can measure declining satisfaction. It becomes a tool where you can actually reverse that and make satisfaction climb again, and that feeds through into revenue on the bottom line. So the antidote to the bad way is make feedback a great experience for customers. And it turns out it's not too hard to do that. Two things need to change. And you still want to do the analysis of feedback, obviously you will. So there's a place for the process improvement cycle, but you introduce additionally feedback going in real time to frontline people who, if they know about a problem, they can fix it straight away. So the first thing that needs to change is you need to route the feedback to the right people. And the second thing that needs to change is that you need to spread it out over time. So instead of doing these big splurge surveys where you get a ridiculously unmanageable amount of data, it's spread through, it's business as usual. You know, it's as if somebody was just giving you a phone call or an email saying, I've got this problem, can you fix it? Well, you're just sending them a feedback form and you're picking up and tuning into that. But as with the customer journey mapping, you need to think through in advance. The hard bit is not the surveys or what response rate, what scale issue. The hard bit is thinking through how you're going to build this into the business so that it's another service, if you like, that you offer your customers, and that you're geared up when feedback comes in. You don't have to work out what to do with it. You've worked out whose responsibility is, how you're going to triage it, how you're going to work out what's service recovery and needs an instant reply, and what's service improvement and needs to feed into your business improvement plans. So again, you think it through. So three big tips for making a really successful customer feedback program. Firstly, is the timing. Ask for feedback when customers are most likely to want to give it. And that's why it's such a good thing to parallel up with your customer journey mapping, because it's in those key steps in the customer journey. Those are the times when you want to check that your best efforts of doing a great job at those steps. You want to check that that's the customer's experience too. So ask for feedback at the time that's relevant to the customer, not when you decide to do a feedback project. Second tip, make it ridiculously easy. So not a 10-minute survey, please. I would say that most people will be happy to spend 20 seconds giving you some feedback, and they can probably tell you all the things that are important to them, score you on the things that are important to them, give you a comment on anything else that they feel. They can do that in 20 seconds, typically. We all can. And they'll thank you for not forcing them to do an exam. Of course, don't restrict them to 20 seconds. If they want to write an essay, then you know, add a comment box where they can do that, and you can pick up on things that you might not have thought to ask about. But 3, 4, 5 questions designed to be about the things that are most important to customers at that point in the customer journey, and then you'll get really, really useful, actionable feedback. And the third tip, respond appropriately. Now, this is slightly scary because nobody wants, we've all got day jobs, we're all busy, and here's me telling you, well, you must respond to every bit of customer feedback that comes in. Well, actually, feedback is like a sales lead. It's not for a new customer, it's a sales lead, if you like, to retain an existing customer. And it might be that the appropriate response is, well, they've given me a comment here, they're not expecting a reply, I can just learn this, feed it through, if there's a learning here, feed it through to the right place, and then job's done. I haven't filled it up their inbox with a reply, we've learned something, and from the scores I know that they're happy. That might be an appropriate response. If it's service recovery, if somebody said, look, I've rung the accounts department 5 times, I've still got a problem with this invoice, and I'm really cross here, then that needs to be routed, and you've got to design the feedback processes so that there is an efficient follow-up. Somebody's got responsibility for dealing with that. So service recovery needs to be plumbed into the organization. And then service improvement, the other type of feedback, well, this is something, one person suggested it, but the improvement is going to benefit all customers. That's a comment on your products or your services or the way you deliver them, and something. And they're not expecting that to change overnight. You know, they're realistic. So just a response that says, thanks for that suggestion. We're going to plumb that in. We really appreciate you giving us the feedback. So why is this approach better? Well, from the customer's point of view, a short cert, nobody's going to thank you for sending a really short, everybody's going to thank you for sending a really short survey. And that's the sort of one that it becomes a virtuous circle, because if you make the feedback experience a great experience, just like you're trying to make every other aspect of your business a great experience, make feedback a great experience, then why wouldn't they fill in your surveys in future? And if you like, you're promoting this feedback cycle where customers feel that they can and feel that it's worth their time giving you feedback because they get a benefit from it. Timed appropriately to those the experiences they've had in the customer journey. And this is the way to get high response rates and the highest quality insights without sending reminders and pestering your customers. So a lot of this goes down, as with the journey mapping, a lot of it goes down to design and planning and thinking through the process, but not stopping at the point where the customer hits submit on the feedback form. It stops when you've worked out how organizationally you're going to respond to that. And by the way, it doesn't require extra heads or setting up extra teams or cottage industries. This should just be built into business as usual. And over time, what we see is customers actually, you go from firefighting to fire prevention, and it really does deliver efficient, great results. And because the customer experience is excellent. So we sell software to help you do this. There are plenty of software out there, but what you can see, I hope, is just a smattering of examples of how we give people information, league tables, heat maps, score charts, detailed comments, trend charts of how people in the organization can get information that helps them do their job better. So in summary, the benefits, by switching to real-time feedback, you can find and fix problems instantly. You get feedback that's actionable because you're asking for it when the customer's got feedback to give. And actionable feedback means you help people in your organization do their jobs much better. And what we find is a very common pattern is if you pilot this in an area, choose an area where you think it's going to be successful, what very often happens is other people will come along, look over that person's shoulder, and they'll say, oh my goodness, that's really useful. That would really help me. How can I get that? So basically, it's a tool to help people do their jobs better. And it's just because you're taking the guesswork out of what customers need and how you can improve for customers. So it really does. It really is a much better way. That story I said earlier about the declining revenue, even though we were doing all these surveys, we switched to this method of real-time feedback, and it reversed the decline in revenue. And from inheriting a department that had missed its last 2 years' targets, we exceeded budget the next 3 years running. So it really does work, and we've got customers as I say, many hundreds of customers who've found that benefit for themselves. It can help you improve service. It will increase customer retention, and it will give your customers that bump in their experience with you that leads them to be confident, putting their reputation on the line to recommend you or refer more business. It makes acquiring new customers that little bit easier. Okay, finally, in closing, the customer journey mapping, if you'd like to find more out about that, contact Jerry. If you're interested in feedback, Net Promoter Score, or measuring customer experience, please contact me. We will send a follow-up email just to round off, if you like. We'd like to know how you found this. We'll give you the contacts again in that email, and we'll throw in a few resources, videos or white papers or something that'll hopefully help you. So we're done now. We're heading up to time. So if anybody does need to leave, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found that useful. We will follow up, but thank you for coming. If anybody has questions or want to stick around, we might take a couple of questions now. And
yeah, Guy, there is a couple of questions coming. So yeah, and thank you for that. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we could journey map the experience of having a customer survey. That's a self-contained journey and an experience in its own right. So as you say, how do we make it as easy and as simple and as effective as possible? So so really interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah, one of the questions that we've had, and please keep them coming, is for the journey mapping sessions, who do we get in the room in terms of the departments and the seniority? In terms of the seniority, sorry, forgive me, the unsatisfactory answer will be it depends. It depends on the culture of your organization and the personalities. What normally tends to work best is when you have a group of middle managers, if you like, if that's the right terminology, people who understand what it's like for customers and their teams who are delivering the experience, or the people themselves who are delivering the experience, but also have a line of sight to the overall kind of corporate objectives. Absolutely, yeah, have people there who are on the front line delivering it. Getting leaders in the room can often, I say, this is where it depends on the culture. Depending on their characters, I've seen them contribute freely, but I've also seen one person come into the room and everyone else just clams up and shuts up. They don't feel comfortable sharing their views about what it's really like and why it's really like that in front of one of the directors. So yeah, by all means, if you think it'll work well, invite the directors. What's interesting is to do a journey mapping session with middle managers and frontliners, and then also do the same exercise just with the leadership team and see how different it is, because I think you'll find that often there isn't that appreciation of what it's really like for customers. So so you can do it a couple of ways there. In terms of the departments, you may, again, depending on the culture, you could just start it with journey mapping. Could just be you and a couple of others. It could be you and someone from the marketing team or the sales team. Expand it out as much as you can, though, to incorporate anyone who's customer facing, or anyone has an indirect impact, and ultimately, yes, get people from the HR team, from finance, from operations, from legal. I did some journey mapping work a little while ago with airports, and we brought in the baggage handlers, the third-party service providers, the airlines. So anyone who's involved in that, get them involved. As I say, not always easy, but the broader you can reach out, the more effective the journey mapping will be. And Guy, there was a question around best practice for how to respond quickly to customers after getting their feedback.
Oh, that's a brilliant question, very common question. It is a brilliant question. And the answer to a lot of questions on feedback is to always flip it around and say, if you were the customer, how quickly would you want somebody to get back? So that gets me off the hook a lot, because I don't know the answer to very much at all. But this one, I do flip it around. I would liken it to say, if somebody emailed you or phoned you you know, a feedback or a survey is just another means of communication. So it's what would reasonably expect. I think it depends on, you have to take it case by case, which is why it's important that really feedback gets triaged, and part of the defining the roles and responsibilities in a feedback program is, right, who does feedback go to make sure that we can respond to it appropriately. I think if it's something where it's a cry for help, somebody's got an immediate problem and you need to do some service recovery, I would say to be a great organization and to get people raving about you, I would say I would want a response as a customer. If it was within an hour, yeah, I would blow my socks off. If it's about service improvement, you said, well, I don't know, I'll use a trivial example. I don't like your on hold music. Then I think the timing is different. They don't expect an immediate reply to that. You can push that to the bottom of the queue. So service improvement things, service improvement, I think you can afford to wait a bit longer. And as I said in the demonstration, some things may not even read a reply at all. Although it's good to reply and it'll make customers feel special, I think you weigh that up against filling up their inbox with an email that contains no real value, or they might not be expecting a reply. So I think it's service recovery, target an hour, anything else probably a day or two, and they'll just be happy that somebody was on the other end and read their feedback. But it is important that you take feedback. It is important that you take responding seriously, because that's the key to whether anybody will respond to a future survey. Yeah, if they think they're wasting the time because nobody's reading it, why would I ever do your surveys again?
Yeah.
Good. Were they the main questions? Great. Well, Jerry, unless there's anything else from you.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the questions, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Guy said, hopefully that was helpful and a little bit thought-provoking. But do get in touch if you have any other questions, and we'll pick those up obviously outside of the session. But no, that's all from me, Guy. Thank you.
Smashing. Well, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody very much for joining us. Have a great afternoon.